Previously on Catastrophic Failure.
It was going so fast that it was just like a white blur going right past the window.
A 2001 Ford Excursion stretch limousine crashed into the parking lot of a busy restaurant in Schoharie, New York, on October 6, 2018.
I just saw a meteor fall out of the sky and just blow up. It was this explosion of energy.
20 people died, 17 passengers, the driver, and 2 bystanders. It became one of the deadliest transportation disasters in decades. What caused this horrific crash? The answer did not come immediately. I'm Jessica Marshall. This is Catastrophic Failure, Episode 2, The Aftermath. The narrative and the details may be upsetting or disturbing at times. Please listen with care. Before producing this podcast, I thought calling something a mass casualty incident had to do with the number of people who died as a result of a situation like a plane crash or a mass shooting. But it's actually not that, exactly. A mass casualty incident is defined as a circumstance causing death or injury that overwhelms the medical resources and personnel available to respond. Deciding what is or isn't a mass casualty incident is not always a simple call. There are no hard and fast numbers. Experts are calling the COVID-19 pandemic a mass casualty incident, and the influenza pandemic before that in 1918. The largest mass casualty incidents from a single event have been explosions or natural disasters that killed and or injured thousands. In the United States, 2 familiar examples would be the September 11th attacks and Hurricane Katrina. Then, there are the plane crashes that kill hundreds at a time, bus accidents that kill dozens.
The twin-engine turboprop nosedived into a house on Long Street in the Buffalo suburb of Clarence Center.
The largest mass casualty incident that New York State had seen in the last few decades was Colgan Air Flight 3407 in 2009.
All 49 people on board and 1 in the house were killed, the first fatal crash of a commercial airliner in 2.5 years.
The largest that New York's capital region, that's the 10 counties around the state capital, had seen prior to the limo crash was nearly 20 years ago.
Around 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon, the chaos near Kramer Point on Lake George begins. Officials say a shoreline cruise ship called the Ethan Allen capsizes.
On October 2nd, 2005, a 40-foot tour boat called the Ethan Allen capsized on Lake George. There were 47 passengers on board, 9 of them were injured, and 20 drowned. The 2001 Ford Excursion stretch limousine that crashed in Schoharie on October 6, 2018, killed 20 people, 17 passengers, the driver, and 2 pedestrians. It was deemed a mass casualty. On a Saturday afternoon in August of 1985, a Cadillac swerved in front of a bus on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. The bus drove over the car, shearing off the top and crushing it. 60 people on the bus were injured, including the driver, and all 7 people in the car died. They were a close-knit group of friends from nearby Joliet. They were on their way to the Bruce Springsteen concert at Soldier Field that day, and one of them was my cousin. Now, I didn't know her, but I grew up in a family that was traumatized by what happened to her. I've seen how senseless and sudden loss can affect those left behind to grieve, and how it seeps down through generations. In a small way, telling this story or this podcast comes from a very personal place. It's not about me, of course. It has nothing to do with me, and it shouldn't, but there's a little thought in the back of my mind that maybe uncovering the truth about what happened in Schoharie might help me make more sense of my own family's experience. I did not know any of the victims of the limo crash, but I thought about every single one of them and what happened to them almost every day for more than 5 years. Independently of my work at the Times-Union, I've thought of their families too, before I met any of them for interviews for this podcast. And this is not an easy story to tell, regardless of whether you have a prior connection to tragedy. I think my co-producer Larry Rulison will wholeheartedly agree that covering this limousine crash for the last 5 years has taken an emotional toll. But the stories of mass casualty incidents and tragedies like these need to be told. So hopefully, they don't happen again. Let's get back to where we left off in the last episode. We are going to pick up on the next day, Sunday, October 7th. This is where Larry Rulison's part in all of this begins.
I remember going to tell my wife, oh boy, this is going to be a big story for us. But I didn't know I was going to actually get involved at all.
Larry's an award-winning business reporter. He knew that come Monday, though, he was going to have to chip in and work on the limo crash story somehow. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation in the newsroom.
Sunday night or early Monday, I read a story. I thought it was the New York Times or the USA Today that was about the story, and it mentioned the fact that the limo had been registered with the US DOT. I think before I actually came in, I looked that up, and I realized that the address of the limo company was on that federal database.
The company was called Prestige Limousine and Chauffeur Service. Suddenly, in Larry's mind, this crash that killed 20 people turned into a business story.
My immediate thought was, well, let me track down the company and go find them. So that's when I got the address. I got the name Shahid Hussain. I didn't know who the heck he was. My plan was to go up to the address, which when I Googled it, I realized it was a motel. But my plan was to go find this Shahid Hussain at the motel.
Larry headed up to the Crest Inn Suites and Cottages in Wilton, about 30 minutes north of Albany.
It's this very ramshackle motel, very sort of dingy, and the people that stay there, sometimes they're like trying to avoid
attention.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I knocked on the door and everything, and no one answered. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes from like around the corner, and he's the manager of the place. And I said, "Well, is the owner here, Shahid?" And he said, "No, he hasn't been around here for a while."
Undeterred, Larry headed back to the newsroom. That name, Shahid Hussain. It was starting to sound a little familiar to him the more that he thought about it.
The first thing I did was I typed in Shahid Hussain's name into the archives of the TU, and that's when it popped up, and I realized, oh my gosh, this guy's like kind of, well known. He was in the...
You realized that the story was going to be a lot bigger than you
Yeah.
even imagined.
Yeah.
At this point on Monday, October 8th, the National Transportation Safety Board had officially opened an investigation into the cause of the crash.
The selection of accidents or crashes that the NTSB will respond to is really left up to the discretion of the NTSB. Certainly, this one was a no-brainer. We were going to go to this one.
Robert Sumwalt was the chairman of the NTSB at this time. He first heard about the crash on Saturday night.
I was actually brushing my teeth when I got a call from the NTSB's Response Operations Center. And they told us of this horrendous crash in upstate New York. It started out that we thought there were 14 fatalities. And then the next morning when we got on the plane to fly to Albany, it was up to 15. And by the time we had landed, we had learned that it was 20 fatalities.
Sumwalt joined the New York State Police for a press conference the next day.
At this time, the identities of the victims are not being released pending the autopsy results and notification of the family members.
The state police and Sumwalt were peppered with dozens of questions. How fast was the limo going? Will they do a toxicology report on the driver? Were the brakes working on the limousine? What caused this horrific crash? But officials had no answers. NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt could only promise a full investigation into the cause of the crash. But that would take time.
You asked about the magnitude of this. 20 fatalities is just horrific. I've been on the board for 12 years, and this is one of the biggest loss of lives that we've seen in a long, long time.
Five years later, Sumwalt says his feelings on that still stand.
Yes, I was involved with every major crash or accident for those 15 years, beginning in August of 2006, and I left June of 2021. But I was not on scene for every one of those. I was only on scene for 36 crashes, and so yeah, I mean, we're talking that I was reviewing some 200 or 225 or 250 accidents over that 15 years, and this one will always stand out in my mind.
We're going to take a short break now. We'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back. You're listening to Catastrophic Failure. On Sunday, October 7th, 2018, Donna Rivenberg did not know where her 29-year-old daughter Amanda was, or what she had been doing on the previous day.
I hadn't talked to her since that Friday morning.
Donna says she thought they were supposed to go to Omegang for Amy Steenberg's birthday the following weekend. Amy was Amanda's best friend from college. It wasn't like Amanda to go out without asking her mother to watch her 2 dogs. So her mother assumed that the plans had not changed.
She would have been asking me, are you going to be here for the girls? Do I need to get Dad? Yeah. Even if she's going away for the day.
But Amanda did not ask for dog sitting that day. By Saturday night, Donna was hearing from friends and on the news that the victims involved were a 30th birthday party headed to Omegang. Panic rising, Donna tried to get answers from the police.
They just kept saying, we have no list, we have no list. They kept asking what she looked like, does she have tattoos? Yeah. She's got a tattoo on her ankle in memory of my mother. It's a cross with a vine. Mm-hmm. Does she have tattoos on her knees? No, she's got one. I kept repeating myself over and over again. She's got one tattoo on her ankle.
On Sunday, a little after 5 p.m., Donna was at a friend's house. She was on the phone inside the house when she heard her friend shouting for her to come out to the porch.
And I hung up the phone and I just thought to myself, they're here.
Donna says a state trooper and an official from the Bureau of Criminal Investigation were outside. They confirmed what Donna had already suspected. Her only child, Amanda Rivenberg, was killed in the limo crash.
When I finally was given the news about Matthew's passing, we had been driving all night trying to find him.
By Saturday night, Jill Richardson Perez suspected that her son Matthew Coons and his girlfriend Savannah Bersesi might have been in that limousine. But she did not think, or could not think, that they were dead.
Matthew had been in, I think, 3 accidents in the past where I had gotten the call, Mom, come get me, such and such happened, I'm okay. But, can you bring me a change of clothes and come get me? So honest to God, that's what I thought this might have been. So I told someone else in the past, before I left, I grabbed a change of clothes for him. I grabbed some stuff that I thought would fit Savannah. I grabbed some blankets and some towels. I grabbed some water bottles, some cereal bar things. And I just said, I looked at my husband, I said, we got to go find him.
Their search led them to a firehouse in Schoharie that night.
We were told that, yes, there was an accident, and at that point implied that it was that my son's group of friends, and they had said to my husband, and then he came and told me that no one had survived, and I just lost my mind. I literally hit the floor, the concrete floor.
In the last episode, we left off with Jerry Bersesi getting a panicked phone call Sunday morning from a friend who thought that her stepdaughter Savannah had been in the limo. Jerry says her first thought was to text Savannah's boyfriend's mother, Jill Richardson Perez.
Now she's hysterically crying on the phone, and she's going, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. She kept saying, I told them to call you. I told them last night to call you, because she had known about the accident.
The them she's referring to is the state police. So Jerry called them next.
I'm panicked, and I'm telling them who I am, and I think my stepdaughter was in an accident. Can you help us?
They had no idea who the people were. They said it was basically chaos identifying people. They had all this. They had cell phones. They had IDs, but they couldn't tell who they went with. It was literally a mess.
The scene has been cleared at this time, and the victims have been transported to Albany Medical Center, where autopsies are now being conducted.
Police confirmed at that initial press conference on Sunday that one of the victims inside the limo had been found alive at the scene. Police said that victim had been flown by helicopter to Albany Medical Center, where they were pronounced dead a few hours later. Jerry and her husband Sam went to Albany Medical Center that day. Sam's ex-wife, Savannah's mother, met them there. Sam says she had a panic attack so severe that she had to be admitted to the ER while they were there. The police still could not confirm Savannah was among the victims at that time, but Sam and his family wanted to be able to identify her. Police and hospital officials would not let them into where the bodies of the victims were being held.
I said, well, we can identify her, because Savannah had tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
I never agreed with tattoos, and now it was the only way we were able to identify her.
Mm-hmm.
Was by her tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm like, tattoos are cool. It's all good.
Yeah.
It really is,
Yeah, it was bad.
But they still wouldn't let us do it.
No, they said we can't let you in there because everybody else is in the other.
Yeah, the
members.
other people that passed away were also in the same room, so they wouldn't let us in there.
After hours, they finally got an answer. A family friend, who was also a state trooper from central New York, drove out to meet them at the hospital. He went into the holding area and made a positive identification. Savannah was among the victims.
When I talked to one of the investigators, we talked privately, and, he just told me right out. He wasn't graphic or anything. He just says, you have no idea what it was like inside of that vehicle, trying to figure out who's who. He said, I'm just going to leave it at that. He says, we were doing everything we can. We've never dealt with anything like a mass casualty like that.
Right.
We didn't have enough vehicles to transport people down to hospital. He said it was just absolute chaos.
By Monday, October 8th, police had not yet released the names of the victims to the public. But many of their identities had already been revealed by friends and families to the media. The victims inside the limousine were a tight-knit group of friends, mostly from in and around Amsterdam, New York, a small industrial city along the Mohawk River in Montgomery County. 2 of the victims were brothers. 4 of them were sisters. There were 2 newlywed couples in the limo. There were 2 married couples who had young children, now orphaned. There were Iraq war veterans, teachers, an IT specialist, a professional dodgeball player, competitive weightlifters. They ranged in age from 24 to 35 years old. Word quickly spread that a vigil for the victims had been planned in downtown Amsterdam that night. 2,500 people showed up, holding candles. A second vigil 2 days later drew hundreds to a high school gymnasium in Schoharie. By the end of the week and into the next, funerals were carried out for many of the victims. Autopsies would soon reveal that all victims died from blunt force trauma from the crash. But the unanswered questions about what caused the crash were still mounting. Back in the Times-Union newsroom on Monday, Larry Rulison was starting to get to some of those answers.
It's incredible. When I look back, we broke so many stories in that first day. The first story was about the fact that the owner of the limousine company was a former FBI informant.
That was why that name, Shahid Hussein, sounded so familiar to Larry. In 2004, a Pakistani national named Shahid Hussein had been the linchpin in a sting operation that resulted in the arrest of 2 Albany men on terrorism charges. Hussein was the FBI's star witness in the cases of pizza shop owner Mohammed Hossein, who is no relation, their names are spelled and pronounced differently, and Imam Yassin Aref. Both were convicted in 2006 and sentenced to decades in prison. It was a huge news story, both locally and nationally. Shahid Hussein was the star witness in another high-profile terrorism case a few years later. That was the Newburgh 4. And we'll talk more about both of those cases in another episode, but for now, it was a bit of a shocking revelation for Larry and the Times-Union newsroom to find out that there was a connection between this horrific limo crash and 2 major terrorism cases from a decade ago. As the day wore on, Larry sat hunched in the corner of the Times-Union newsroom, hard at work.
We were finding DMV documents that showed how the company's insurance had lapsed multiple times. We'd found out DMV reports on when the car had been purchased and subsequent inspections that were not legal. On an almost daily basis and hourly basis, we were finding out more information that clearly pointed to some major problems here with this company, Prestige Limousine.
The Times-Union found a Craigslist ad that Prestige Limousine and Chauffeur Service had posted 2 days before the crash. They were selling the white 2001 Ford Excursion stretch limousine. For $9,000, the ad said, you can get the 18-passenger limo with 180,000 miles on it. It also promises that it's, quote, DOT ready. DOT here is short for the Department of Transportation, the state agency that regulates stretch limousines for hire. A stretch limo has to pass multiple New York State DOT inspections each year to even be allowed on the road. Larry then tracked down the last 2 Department of Transportation inspection reports on the 2001 Ford Excursion limousine.
And I think it must have been like 2 o'clock. We were able to publish a story that said that this limousine had failed 2 inspections prior to the crash. And that was like huge.
The first failed inspection was in March of 2018. One of the issues cited was, quote, defective brakes. The limo was ordered out of service with a big red and white inspection sticker slapped on the windshield. The second inspection was dated September of 2018. A month before the crash, yes, 1 month before the crash, the limousine was once again ordered out of service. Larry Rulison's breaking stories that day and the following week would set the stage for the next 5 years of investigation and revelation about the limo crash. It would reveal a string of catastrophic failures that began with a simple truth. That 2001 Ford Excursion stretch limousine was not supposed to have been on the road that fateful October day in 2018. Next time on Catastrophic Failure.
The sole responsibility for that motor vehicle being on the road on Saturday rests with Naman Hussein.
Do you have any comments?
No.
Do you have any comments? Do you have anything to say to the families?
Anything you want to say to the families? Ladies and gentlemen.
Before we go, one more thing. State police eventually released the names of all of the victims. 20 names that I've read and heard spoken countless times. At memorials, in news reports, in courtrooms, and court documents. The fact is, they were all people who lived unique and meaningful lives, and that can easily get lost in the telling of this story. They're not just a list of names. They all deserve to be remembered for how they lived rather than how they died. And I promise, as this podcast continues, we are going to honor that. Larry and I want to take a minute here to read all of those names out loud. Savannah Bersessi, Rachel Cavosi, Matthew Coons, Patrick Cushing, Mary Dyson,
Rob Dyson, Amanda Hulse, Brian Huff, Abigail Jackson, Adam Jackson,
Allison King, Scott Lisanikia, Aaron McGowan, Shane McGowan, Amanda Rivenberg,
James Schnurr, Amy Steenberg,
Axel Steenberg, Rich Steenberg, Michael Ukai.
Catastrophic Failure is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall. Original reporting by Larry Rulison. Editorial direction and fact-checking by Erica Smith and Casey Seiler. Our theme music is Undercurrent by Harper Ray. Visit timesunion.com to see our full coverage of the Schoharie limo crash, including photos, maps, videos, and more.